Good evening, everyone. Welcome along to this week's group coaching call. And I seem to have got the wrong slide presentation up. I've just got the wrong intro screen. Anyway, let's look at the cycling data, a bit of a deep dive into things, similar to what we did with last fortnight's running presentation. Going to look at a few different types of training, looking at how I look at and determine compliance. Going to look at different options on both training tilt, training peaks, and on velocity. And we'll finish by looking at Stu's latest ramp test results. So why do we do the session as planned? Every session has a purpose, and depending on what we're trying to achieve, I might use different intensities to try and determine, or not try and determine, try and promote improvement or enhancement of that particular thing. At level 2, we're predominantly trying to improve the efficiency of our aerobic metabolism. At level 3, stepping things up, once again, we're still working on improving aerobic metabolism, but we're also managing that around a little bit of influence from lactic acid. The next step up, level 4, and depending on the structure of the session, we will look to build resilience and tolerance to lactic acid and also enhance clearing of that lactic acid out of our system. So you might find different sessions with short rest periods to give you a little bit of clearance there. Others will be longer, more sustained, or even have higher intensity efforts, intermittent throughout that workout, just to build in a bit more lactic acid for you. Level 5, we're trying predominantly to increase our VO2 max, as well as develop the tolerance and clearance of our lactic acid. Time trials and ramp tests, there are physiological benefits to doing these sessions as well, but it's also a great gauge of your improvement, and we can measure improvement going along. Whether we're doing that with heart rate, with the Carmichael field test, using a ramp test, or using an FTP test where you've got a number of shorter intervals to build fatigue, and then hitting a 20-minute time trial to test and see what your functional threshold power is. All those three different options give a great gauge on where your fitness is compared to where it has been previously. So let's have a look at a steady state session. Now, this is mine from yesterday. This is looking at it on Training Peaks, and you'll see the level 2 there. I spent 20% of my time in that zone. That's not quite the plan, Ray, was it? Large amount of time in level 1. You can also look at the chart down here and see where that purple line should be. It should be in that slightly grayed out area. And we'll have a look at that in a little bit more detail shortly. This is us looking at the same data within Training Tilt. For those of you using that, this might look a little bit more familiar. Once again, we can see it's relatively steady, gently climbing up. And then our peak power at different durations, we've got different power levels. And you'll notice the 30-minute peak power, or the highest average power for 30 minutes was 36 watts. However, when we look at it in velocity, you'll see that I spent 97% of the time in zone, 3% under, and I never went above it. You might say, well, that doesn't really line up, Ray. And then look back here and say, well, yeah, it doesn't line up. The difference being this zone here is only, 49 watts difference between it. So if you take the middle of this zone, that's 66%, and velocity is set for 40 watts either side of that. So we're talking 165, between 125 and 205, as long as I'm within that range, which I was in velocity. I spent 97% of the time in zone. So we can come across here and have a look at that, and we can see that my average power was 133, which is outside the range for level 2 here. And all my velocity workouts I had stacked up have all disappeared. So I won't be able to show you them, sorry. Um, so when we look at it in training tilt, if I've zoomed in on that unintentionally, unscrolling, you can see the slowly changing. There we go. Zooming in again. It was relatively steady, climbing as we made our way through the workout. The average power, the data is exactly the same as it is in training peaks in terms of the average heart rate and the cadence. It's all coming from the same data file. If those velocity tabs I had open hadn't closed, I must have been automatically logged out of velocity, unfortunately. We'd be able to have a look in a little bit more detail, but no different detail from what is in the slide presentation there. So 97% in zone for that one based on the parameters and velocity. Only 20% of the time in zone based on the parameters within training peaks. Another workout here, Jess might recognize this one. So Jess doesn't have a power meter on her bike. She trains via heart rate, and she has kept in zone for 97% of her ride today. 2.5 hours. She spent 2 hours, 25 minutes and 44 seconds in zone, which is a really impressive effort. Well done there, Jess. So having a look at that, we can see that detail there. We can see the heart rate average 133, maxed out at 147, which is still within inside the target zone of 126 to 152. In fact, the only time she spent out of it was in this initial stage. I think if we look close enough, yep, she dipped under there briefly, and there might be another one in there. Yep, just one beat under. So momentarily a few times during the ride, which is an exceptional effort. When we look at a different style of steady state, this session here, Gail Bernhardt's half Ironman bike intervals #2, spend 20 minutes at level 3 in the middle of the workout. So 10-minute warm up at level 2, 20 minutes at level 3, and then the final 10 minutes at level 1 to 2. You'll see it's a lot bigger range there. So these sort of workouts give you a steady state effort at that higher intensity. And here is that data there. You can see that I spent a portion of this time below zone. In fact, looking at that, I spent 6% of the workout. So 12% of that interval in zone, which was less than optimal. But once again, it comes down to the parameter differences between velocity and training peaks. So that was plus or minus on the minus side of the range within velocity for that workout. Having a look for the selection there, the 20-minute selection, the average power was 179, which is just below level 3. So that would mean it's within that parameter for velocity. You can also see the normalized power was 180. So very similar to the average power in this instance. There's the velocity details there. So you can see within velocity this time, it's 88% in zone, taking into account the warm-up and the cool-down, and the fact that the cool-down has a larger range in terms of level 1 and 2. So that's an example, once again, of the differences between the two different platforms. But based on the fact that velocity was up on the screen as I was riding with it, I was able to track, make sure I was in that green area within velocity and stayed within that 88% of the time. Now, looking at some interval rides, now there's a lot more variety, a lot more things to look at, the intervals, the rest intervals. I don't worry too much about the warm up or cool down as long as it's not being done at the total wrong intensity. Was the workout or the intervals themselves done at the correct intensity? Was that intensity maintained or did it drop off during the workout? Was there planned variety within the intensity? If so, was that workout conducted as prescribed? And what was the effect of terrain if that workout was done outside, out on the real roads? So here is a workout. I think this is one of yours, Stu. 4 by 8 minute threshold intervals. We're starting off with a 10-minute warm up at level 2, then a minute and a half at level 3 minus, a minute and a half at level 3 plus, a minute at level 4 minus, and then the last minute here at level 4 plus. 5 minutes at level 2, and then we're into these intervals. It says 3 by 8, but it's definitely 4 8-minute intervals there with 2-minute rest interval at level 2 in between. And you can see when it's power data is overlaid with your speed, your cadence, your heart rate, elevation if it was done on the road, but you can see that's flatline, probably about 4 meters above sea level at Stu's place. Looking at the same data again from velocity, and you can see that the 10 minutes and then the various step ups, the step up from my level 3 minus to level 3 plus is very minuscule, and then the same again with level 4 minus to level 4 plus, once again minuscule. But Stu's effectively nailed this throughout the workout, peaked a little bit with some gear changes, and got the hang of that a lot better after the first rep. You can see he spent 100% of time in zone for 60-minute workout, or I think it might have even been a 64-minute workout. There's momentary peaks in power, don't even add up to 1%. So he's in zone 100% of the time. Have a look at that here in velocity, in training tilt. We can see the data, the various intervals. We've got our 10 minutes, our 1 minute, 1 minute, rounding that to 1 minute there, but they were 1 minute 30s up here. And then working our way through the rest of the workout. Once again, that's all overlaid there. We can expand that and get a better look at it. And we can dive into any momentary point in here, or we can clear some of it out so it's easier to read. Get rid of the speed, get rid of the elevation, and let's get rid of the cadence and just look at and see what's happening. Even if we get rid of the power, and we can see the heart rate is quite fluctuating. You can see it drops down here for a rest and stays down a lot longer than it does in these intervals here, or these moments in here. And going by the fact that there's a big drop out there and a big spike there, I think there's something else happening here with Stu's heart rate strap not necessarily getting picked up by velocity at various points through the workout. Let's put that power back in, and you can see it's relatively stable across each of these intervals. We can dive into that in full detail, and we can just hold our cursor over any moment and see exactly what Stu's power was. And you see it's around that 220 mark most of the way through, with a few fluctuations up into the 230 there, 233, and low point over here somewhere, 210. So he's staying within a 20 watt band nice and consistently, which is great to see. This is the same workout, but this is my data this time. And we can see in training peaks, I was sitting right at the bottom end of the range throughout things. which was also meaning that in velocity, I was in the zone relatively most of the time, 86%. You can see that data is nice and flatline. You can see those step ups a little bit more clearly with a bit more expansion between them. And going back out and looking at that in training peaks, you can see right on the cusp there in training peaks, each of the intervals. We can have a look at that. Our 8 minutes there at threshold should be between 229 and 265. And you can see my normalized power is 221 and 220. So at the low end of the range, 222, 223, and 224. So slight increases from rep to rep as I made my way through that workout. Looking at a different style of workout here, a VO2 max workout, Martin Gabala intervals 28. This was done during the week, Thursday morning, if I remember correctly. Was it, Stu? It's giving me the thumbs up. So it's 8 30-second repetitions at level 5 plus. And I was encouraging everyone to ride that at maximum intensity. And you can see Stu peaking up here, but you can also see that power tapers off relatively quickly as he was trying to hold it as high as possible for those full 30 seconds. Good 4.5 minutes rest interval right down at level 1, below that intensity of the warm-up. So we can dive into that data a little bit more. And we can see that biggest peak being there. If I can get it right on there, 643, 600 and something watts, maybe even a bit more. But we can get that data by going back out and clicking on the analyze. Scrolling down, we can see Stu's peak power was 896 watts. And he spent the bulk of the time, 36 minutes at level 1. And if we think 4.5 minutes at level 1, I think you'll find that's very close to 36 minutes. 4 minutes at level 5 plus, that's 8 by 30 seconds. Which one's his highest one there? Actually, I'll need the other screen for that. I'll go back and do that shortly, but we'll zoom in on that one and have a good look at the decay on that rep. So we'll use that one there with an average power of 599 watts. And we'll expand that out. So you can see that there's his 30 seconds. And you can see his power went up nice and high initially, peaking at whatever, it's not going to give 824 watts in this rep. And then dropped down as he worked hard to sustain it and dropped off right at the last minute. It wasn't able to quite hold the full 30 seconds. If he hadn't gone so high or let it decay a little bit faster, he might have been able to hold that effort a little bit longer. We will never know. He did what he was told, as I encourage people to push and hold as high a power as possible for the duration. Stu worked his little butt off to maintain that as high as possible. Looking at this one here, we're seeing a similar story, although it's dropped off and a little bit later, but we'll see the peak is Actually, that's his highest peak there. So he must have burnt himself out in this rep. So he's under a bit of fatigue the next rep. There's Stu's velocity data, 99% in zone, 1% under zone. And that might be because he's dropped out momentarily below level 2 during the warm-up or the cool-down, but spent the bulk of the time in zone. Another workout here, half 45-15. This workout, we've got 5 reps at 45 seconds at level 3, another 5 by 45 seconds at level 4, and then a final 5 by 45 seconds at level 5. And you can see that last rep, I gave everything I had and peaked. When we look at it in velocity, you can see the dips between getting a little bit lower each time, but the peaks are also getting higher in between. 85% in zone. Take that back. Here's the workout in training peaks, and we can see that most of these reps are very close to being in that grayed out area or spending a good portion of them there. Other than the warm-up and the cool-down, I wasn't using the plus or minus within velocity as much as possible. I was working to keep these and build them progressively through the workout. Looking at that last rep there and bearing in mind these have only got 15 seconds rest interval in between. Normalized power of 346, but the peak power or the maximum power was 424 watts. So nearly 100 watts higher. When we take it back and look at that one there, we're only talking not even 60 watts above. So I really gave everything I could on that last one. These lead-in ones were exactly that, the lead-in for the 5 that count. So having a look at the different responses to different intensities there as a bit of a contrast between the VO2 max style of the Martin Gabala series of intervals or the 45-15 sets. Time trials and ramp tests, these are used as a gauge benchmark to see whether you've made improvement or not. Now, particularly with time trials, did the athlete improve? Time trial, you're going to get a faster time. If we're looking at a set duration time trial, like a 20-minute max effort time trial on the trainer, we're going to look to see what was your average, your average power or normalized power during that time. Did it increase? Did it stay the same? If it stayed the same, what was going on with the heart rate? Let's have a look at some of Stu's data here. 31st of August, 6 weeks ago, Stu did the ramp test. Maxed his heart rate out at 180 beats per minute. His power maxed out at 298 watts. And his 60-second power was also the 298 watts. That's because of the erg mode. If Stu wasn't using erg mode, then this would probably not have been his max power because the erg mode kept him at his highest power for those 60 seconds. The last 60 seconds he was kept at that power. That was also his max. If he was using non-erg mode, that would have been fluctuating up and down as he was trying to keep that power on. So as a result of that, his FTP was 223 watts. Yesterday, Stu did another ramp test. This time his heart rate was a lot higher. With 6 weeks of work, Stu's built up the ability to not necessarily sustain that max heart rate, but grew to develop a response for that. His max power was now a little bit higher. That was sustained for those 60 seconds because of the erg mode factor, and his FTP was now 6 watts higher. So he's made a significant improvement, 3% in 6 weeks. is pretty impressive. So we can see that data here. As he's building up, let's just get rid of some of the, if I zoomed in on that somehow. Yep. Come on, reset. It's a slow process. There we go. Get rid of, actually use that one there. So we can see Stu's power stepwise up as the erg mode controlled it. There's his final minute there at the max power of 298 watts. If we overlay that with heart rate, we'll see his heart rate progressively built up, basically in line with his increases in power. And if we look at the same data, or the equivalent data for yesterday, we can see that all building up with the power and heart rate as well. We can also dive down in. Oh, he's done it as one. There we go. So we can look at that final minute. So final minute there. And we can see his heart rate peaked early on as it stepped up. But then as he's giving everything before pulling the pin at the last minute, or at the end of the minute, that's where his heart rate maxed out at 194. We can go back and do an in-depth analysis compared to the previous one. And we can see the same thing. Heart rate peaked as he worked hard to sustain this higher effort with the build-up of fatigue from all the previous efforts leading to that point. So those are some of the key things I'm looking for when going through and having a look over your training. Bear in mind that members on the Tribe platform, I don't go in on a regular basis and analyze that data. That's part of the team and the elite packages. But any questions on the topic initially? And then we'll come through a second time and see if anyone has any questions outside of the cycling data side of things. To keep it simple, as opposed, I used to go through in the order people arrived on the call, but we will do that based on the order everyone is on my screen. So we'll start with you, Jess. Any questions?
No questions from me.
Sweet. Move over to you then, Jason.
No, nothing. It's interesting to watch the overlays between all the heart rates and how sort of how they, because most of the time I've got training built on a phone screen, so I don't get that frequency. That's quite cool to see it off.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages of the desktop application. I only ever go in and look at people's data on my desktop for that reason. It just makes it easier to look at. You're looking at it bigger in front of you rather than down on a small screen. Any questions from you, Diane?
No, I'm all good, thank you.
Sweet. Stu?
No, I'm all good.
Great. Thanks for letting me use the bulk of your data for this as well.
No worries.
Tanya?
Yeah, I have a question. How often should you do a ramp test?
I typically schedule them sort of every 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes out as far as 8 weeks. You don't want to be doing them all the time. They do provide a bit of training benefit, and I've got some, shall we say, nasty developments for some velocity workouts in the, I'll say, mid-term distance, where we're combining ramp tests and also a workout, not necessarily immediately afterwards, but in a short recovery period afterwards. So I'm going to be incorporating them in a little bit more frequently for those that are on velocity and attending the live classes, but don't expect them in the next couple of months anyway to show up on velocity.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
But yes, it must be about time that you're due to do one.
No.
Any other questions? We'll go through in the same order. I see Stu's reaching in. I'm not sure if he's grabbing another drink or whether he's trying to unmute. We'll get to you shortly, Stu, if it was a question. Jess, start with you.
I don't really have a question. I guess I'm excited to do my race in the new running shoes that I got, which are carbon plated, which the last race I did, they weren't carbon plated. So I guess I'm excited to see the difference. I don't know if I'll really notice a difference, but yeah.
No, your training's coming along nicely at the moment. Yeah, counting down to the Auckland half, you will be humming.
Hopefully, fingers crossed after all this training.
Yeah, no, you'll do well. I've also going to give you free rein to race that as you see fit. I'm not going to give you power zones or anything to target at different points in the race. The only advice around that, and it's going to be an unstructured race plan, is to start conservatively and build as you make your way through the event so that you're finishing as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's what I thought I should probably do. I definitely don't want to go out too hard and then crash for the last 10Ks. That wouldn't be good, but because I'm used to the distance, I think it should be good.
Yeah. It is a big learning opportunity if you do go a little bit too hard. But I think you've got the capabilities to crack out a really great time.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, perfect. We'll see you up there.
Yeah, thank you.
Sweet. Jason, next cab off the rank.
No questions. Having looked at Jess's data for the last couple of calls, I don't think there's anything you can't do. I'm feeling quite inadequate. But yeah, no questions.
Yeah, being crook has an impact on things. It takes a little bit to get back to that fitness. So don't stress. You are on the pathway back. All right, Diane.
Just good to get back into it again after 5 weeks of being sick. So yeah, quite enjoying it actually.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Your weeks have been going well. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Stu.
Yeah, so I guess today I found some beer glasses which will ride the wilderness first place. So I'm just hoping that you can shed some light on one of our other super subs about 259 watt FTP and how that'll relate to smashing a good time to Cowboys.
It'll all come down to the pacing. So, and not setting expectations that your body can't cash. So, yeah, appropriate goals is going to be the key there, Stu.
I just don't want them not having a training plan for the race. Got to go for gold.
Okay. Yes. Unlike for Jess, for Jason, I will give him some target targets to ride to. Tanya, saving the best to last.
I've got some nice beer glasses from Brunner Ride Stu. No, I had to Google carbon plated running shoes. Yes, so yeah, real interesting. I'll have a look into those. Speaking of running, yeah, I just started back running. Well, I wouldn't call it running, I'd call it 1 minute run, 3 minutes walk, but hey, it's fine. But yeah, 5 weeks till my event, cycle around Lake Taupo. So yeah, on the countdown.
Awesome. Yeah, so carbon plated running shoes, a bit like carbon on a bike. Pay a fortune and you go faster. It's simple maths. The more dollars you get pay, the faster you go.
What sort of dollars are we talking for these carbon plated shoes?
I'll let Jess jump in on that. She's hiding her face.
Well, I did get $80 off, but they were $450.
There's the answer.
Makes my 2.5 grand full carbon road bike look cheap, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I won't be doing the conversion to US or Canadian dollars for our North American friends who are hopefully sound asleep, getting good recovery, and will catch up with this video in the morning. Any final questions before we wrap things up?
If you were doing lactate testing, how important is that? Or is it not really relative?
Not really relative. I know it's a big in popularity thanks to a group of Norwegians, both runners, triathletes, and a couple of cyclists as well. It does give you some benefits. I sold my lactate tester a few years ago. I used it I did lactate testing when I was a student down at Otago University, every opportunity I got. And then in 2009, I think it was, I bought my own lactate testing device and used that solidly for about 5 years. If you've got power from a power meter, whether cycling or running, you've got, I believe, more valuable data than it's not necessarily discomfort, it's a pinprick to get the blood, but it's the time delay, the mucking around and then making decisions. If you want to see some good videos about it, look at any of Lionel Sanders' vlogs in the lead up to Kona Ironman. He's doing them daily, and he's including a lot of lactate testing, including riding with Christian and doing some run sessions with the Norwegians. So check out some of those vlogs on YouTube. Any final questions? Jason's got one.
Just in terms of the power data that we are analysing, I'm just thinking I went for a ride outside for once today. And how much is it versus like how much weight is put on the fluctuations? Because I know my average power would have been within range, but interested to see how much fluctuation there is within that sort of zone too. Obviously the goal is to have it flat, but I mean,
we ride in the real world.
Yeah.
There, you're going to test my language skills here. There's an English word, stoichiometry, I think it is, which indicates how much fluctuation up and down there is. Power, by the virtue of it, is very up and down. 1 second you might be riding at, I'll say 200 watts, the next 280 watts. Half a second later, you're back down to 190. There's a lot of up and down depending on how much force you're applying, what part of the pedal stroke. There's a lot going on there. What I recommend for people on their watch or their head unit, the bike computer, is they're displaying an average or a rounding of their power data over 3 seconds as a minimum, up to 10 seconds. And some people even do it for longer. And you ride to keep that 10-second average within the zone.
Right. Yeah, because I thought mine would probably look a little bit more like an ECG today, but the 3 and sort of 5 second power are a lot more normalized.
Yeah, and that's the the advantage of having them, and that's why they were developed back in the very early days of power meters. And I remember doing some lab testing at Otago University. The numbers on the screen just meant absolutely nothing to me because they were going all over the place. They were not consistent, whereas my heart rate back then, or it still is these days, a heart rate was my go-to tool for monitoring intensity, and that was relatively stable. But the 10-second average is the key.
Cool. Thank you.
So just looking before Ray, sorry, Button, but so on Jess's data, so she doesn't have power, she rides to heart rate, you were saying. So does that, so was she actually riding or was that running that she was doing there?
That was riding.
Because, like, all kudos to her to keep her heart rate in level 2, but I'm buggered if I know how, like, my data is all over the show, like, from riding. Like, I can't keep, like, I can get into a time trial situation, come down the valley doing 40k now, but my heart rate and everything will just be going up and down like a yo-yo.
Yep, and that's riding out on the roads. That's the very nature of it. If you compare your data from an indoor ride, you would be in zone a higher proportion of the time. And that ride data that I showed of Jess's today was an indoor ride. She also, when she's out on the road, has an exceptional amount of time in zone, but on the trainer, it's always higher. Anything else springing up? It's good. These questions lead to further questions. No? All right. Well, we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining me this evening. We'll look forward to doing another group coaching call in a couple of weeks' time. Look forward to seeing you then. Have a fantastic evening. Have an amazing week. Train hard, train smart, and I'll see you out there.
Cheers, Ray.
Thanks,
Good
Ray.
luck,
Hey,
mate.
Ray. Thank you.
You're welcome, team.
Thanks, guys. See ya.